Welcome to The Dirt, an economics podcast bringing you the down and dirty agronomic science behind growing better crops and bigger returns. Backed by Nutrien-economics.com, we break down the latest research, news, and insights to help farmers make better business decisions. Let's dig in.
Hello again. Welcome back to The Dirt podcast. I'm Dr. Karl Wyant, Director of Agronomy at Nutrien, and I am excited to get into today's episode. We're going to dig in and we're going to talk about what it takes to agronomically manage and produce the crops we eat. Strawberries, produce, potatoes, all these different crops that my guest here is an expert in nutrient management of, and super fun. And I want to just call out Dr. Christopher Hight, an agronomist working with Grimmway Produce Group, one of North America's largest leading producers of carrots. Oh, I forgot carrots in my introduction. Carrots, potatoes, and vegetables. Christopher, welcome to the show. And please start off just quickly introducing yourselves, and we'll jump into the questions here, and we'll fill our audience in on all these great crops that you have.
Thanks for the introduction, Karl. I'm Dr. Christopher Hight. I'm an agronomist with Grimmway Produce Group. I work with carrots, potatoes, and about 65 other different types of vegetables and variations there within. So including broccoli, cauliflower, kohlrabi, a bunch of different lettuces. So excited to be here this morning.
65 different kinds of vegetables, huh? That's a lot to manage. That's a lot to
It's a lot.
keep in your mind, and I'm sure you got some pretty busy spreadsheets. You were saying when we were chatting at the start of the call, you're already thinking about fall here. I mean,
I'm already thinking winter.
How early does your yeah? I was going to ask you how early does your fall actually start?
Usually towards the end of July, they'll start getting things in the ground. July into August, and the very first week of August is technically the beginning of summer when they'll start getting everything in. But it's going to be crazy.
So you've got an ag calendar that's a little bit different from a lot of other agronomists who are typically running that spring to fall growing window, and then they can kind of not grow as much during the wintertime, but you are active all year round. I mean, tell us about where you live on the central coast of California. What makes it so unique for produce production? And as a fellow agronomist, what makes it so exciting to be farming in the Central Coast?
I'd say the most important part of farming on the Central Coast is the temperatures during the day and the nighttime. Daytime, it gets maybe 65 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and then it only goes down to about 50, 55 at nighttime. So you get a very limited range of temperatures, but the cooler night temperatures allow the plants to kind of decompress, go into that dark Kelvin cycle, and produce the sugars and the vegetative mass that they need to get those vegetables out in time. Whereas in the desert, it gets pretty darn hot and the plants tend to shut down. You don't have the nice nighttime temperatures. So really, it is that sweet spot of it's warm during the day, but cool during the night.
Fantastic. Christopher, you bring up a really good point. You mentioned the Central Coast, and then you mentioned the desert. I think we should introduce the listeners here to a little bit about you and I. There's the summer salad bowl, which is where a lot of your lettuces and leafy greens are coming from. Those are coming from your neck of the woods, correct?
Yes. So while you guys are dormant and getting ready for your winter planting, the winter salad bowl down in the desert, the Central Coast is booming with summer production, both strawberries and all the vegetables that are coming out of there.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's such a cool thing we get to do in the irrigated Western agriculture is if you go to the store in January and you buy a big box of spinach for your smoothie, you can see where it's grown. It says Salinas on it. In the summertime, it'll say maybe Yuma, Brawley, Imperial in the wintertime. And that's those two salad bowls that are kind of opposite climates, really. And they're kind of working two opposite ends of a seasonality to produce all these vegetables year round. And it's exciting. I think that just shed some light on the complexity of these food supply chains that, there's an agronomist at the center of it making these nutrient plans so we can plant spinach and grow spinach in July. We can grow it in November. And we're filling shelves, we're filling people's refrigerators, and ultimately filling their plate with food that's highly nutritious and safe to eat.
Yeah, very much so.
You mentioned this unique weather and climate that the Central Coast has. And I'll just be honest to the listeners here. I'm a desert guy. Like our July is boiling hot. It's like 118 degrees Fahrenheit. The low might be 100 if we're lucky. And then I go to the Central Coast with my colleagues in July, and I'm sitting there in a hoodie and I'm shivering, and I don't look cool at all. Yeah, it's windy. But the plants look fantastic. They look so happy. They're nice and green. They're growing. They've got that climate. Tell me about a typical sort of day in the Central Coast where you're farming and you've got such a unique climate to farm in.
I'd say the mornings usually start off a little foggy. It's a little colder out, so you do have that residual moisture hanging around. So you tend to see a little bit more mildew pressure and botrytis and a lot of that hanging around during the early mornings, and you'll see that kind of go into the mid-afternoons. The wind will start picking up usually around noon, clear that fog out, and then you start seeing the nice day come through, and it usually gets up to about 75, but you don't see it reach above 80, 82 most of the time. And so you really have this nice weather where it's not going to burn the crop down. But on top of that, you select the varieties that are going to do well in that temperature and that time slot with that amount of light. In your 118 degrees out there, you would pick a variety that would be more heat tolerant if you were going to grow it down there.
We call that cotton, Christopher. It's a little too spicy for lettuce. So you've got this growing climate that's unique. You've sort of pointed out all the fantastic parts. What's the tough part of growing in a climate like that that's sort of just unique?
One of the biggest things is it is moist down there, so you are going to see a lot of those diseases you wouldn't see. We get fusarium, we get mildew, we get botrytis, we get all of those fun things that you need a lot of moisture, but you need a good amount of temperature too. So in lettuces, last year we were seeing a lot of fusarium, and it would look good, and then we would get a heat temperature spike, and it'd be set. I mean, heat temperature spike is relative because 75 is a temperature spike in the Central Coast, and 100 is a temperature spike where you are. But you would just see the plant start declining and going down, and that would be one of the things that it looked good for 2 months, and then that last week or so it just falls off. And so that was really one of the things that was difficult. Was it looked good all the way through, and then you get hit at the end. I'd say between the fog and the mildew, the amount of soil-borne diseases increasing has been one of the things, because it is planted consistently with the same cropping system, because they do well there.
Interesting. Okay, so you've got that disease pressure that's mounting. You've got some of those environmental conditions that are just, if it's perfect for growing a crop, it's probably perfect for growing a botrytis or a mildew, right? Yeah, interesting. Rotate. There. I think that lesson applies through most of the farming world, right? Is rotate and manage your disease pressure accordingly.
That's another key thing that's out there, is that they do rotate between the strawberries and the vegetables. So you'll be able to come in, and strawberries a lot of time will clear the ground, and they'll be in such a long rotation that they'll be there for almost 14 months a lot of the time. So you have that period where there isn't a vegetable in the ground. So you do have a little bit of leeway where there's not a susceptible crop in the ground. So strawberry and a blackberry and a raspberry tend to be good rotation partners with the vegetables.
Oh, interesting. So you've got a very quick crop with the vegetables, and then you've got more of a quasi-permanent approach with the caneberries. That's the fancy name for raspberries and blackberries and the strawberries.
Yes. Yeah. So you have a nice little rotational partner there with them. And people who grow strawberries don't usually grow veggies, and people who grow veggies don't usually grow strawberries. So you can work with other farmers in the area to try and manage that.
Excellent. So Christopher, as an agronomist, you've got so many crops, and I think I counted 68 crops, and when you did your introduction, 65 vegetable crops, carrots, potatoes, and now caneberries, maybe 70 almost. How on earth do you keep track of the nutrient management plans for these crops? I mean, you must have a really good memory, because that's a lot. We've got, you go to some systems, it's wheat and canola. You go to other systems, it's corn and beans. Here you're coming in with 70. How on earth do you keep it all managed?
I think breaking it into commodity groupings. So broccoli and cauliflower are relatively similar. Iceberg lettuce and romaine lettuce, head lettuce, butter lettuce are kind of in the same grouping. So you go down to commodity groups, and then from there you have a little bit of specification. It's going to take more water to grow an iceberg than it would a romaine or a butter lettuce. So it's just little tweaks here and there, but I'd say break it into a commodity group, and then you have probably 8 commodity groups. And then from there, you can just tweak your fertility plans and your nutrient management just a bit for each one.
Christopher, talk about just super quick how you manage the quality of the crop, the sweetness of the berry, the size of the berry, the crispness of the lettuce, because we like a certain crispness when we bite into our cheeseburger with lettuce on it, right? How do you manage that?
A lot of that is all about strategy and what nutrient you put out when. So early on in a strawberry, you want to focus on nitrogen and phosphorus. So you're building that plant up, you're building that root, you're splitting the crown so that you have enough growing points that are going to give you strawberries out of it. Once you have that strawberry growing, though, you want to give a lot of micronutrients like zinc and iron. And then through that, you want to make sure that you're putting out some potassium and some calcium that really firms up that cell wall and then will translocate those sugars. So you're growing a large fruit, and then you're filling that with enough sugar to make it sweet. That would be the strategy for broccoli. Lettuce, I would say, build that frame and then pull back the water so that it will harden up. But you're going to have to give it enough potassium and calcium to make it that crisp lettuce, not just a flimsy lettuce that wilted while you were sitting there.
We're very particular about our lettuce crispness and greenness. And I think for the listener here, what's important to take away from this is the intentionality of the nutrient management plan. Not only are we growing yield, but we're manipulating those fertilizer plans on a weekly basis to get a quality, some sort of market metric of what people like to eat, because it has to look the right way, it has to taste the right way. There's texture concerns, sweetness concerns. And as an agronomist, Christopher, you are out there like managing all those different puts and takes on not just the yield, but yield with quality, because you have to have both in order to optimize your profitability on an acre.
Yeah, one or the other doesn't cut it. You have to have both yield and quality.
We talk about the 4 R's a lot. You and I are both certified crop advisors. We've served on the Western Region Board together, and we talk about efficiencies, trying to get as much of that fertilizer into the plant as possible, whether it's NPK, micronutrients, calcium. We make a big deal out of it. How do you adjust that 4R nutrient management plan for each crop? Like, do you have a specific script for each crop because you know broccoli has a different uptake pattern relative to strawberry, and so you can kind of tweak those programs accordingly?
I would say there's a general framework, and then you go out and look at the crop and see how it's growing, making sure that it's growing correctly. Take tissue samples, soil samples to make sure that what you put out into the soil or as a foliar spray is actually making it into the plant. I don't know how many times I've seen people put out different products and expect nutrients to be making it into the plant, but the way it was put out or the plant is just not uptaking it, whether the roots are saturated and just need a little bit of breathing room, you need to back off your irrigation. So it's not always about the nutrition part of it. It's about making sure that your soil is growing correctly, and the soil texture, soil health, the amount of organic matter you have in your soil, those are all going to play into how much fertility you need to give that crop. So I'd say having a general framework, but then knowing your ground well enough that you can modify your plan well enough to grow that crop well and get it out of the ground.
Yeah. So on the irrigation side, Christopher, are you using sensors to make sure that soil is kind of that Goldilocks level of irrigation, so you're not too wet, so you're not limiting your root activity, but not too dry where you're pulling back too much?
So I have used those in the past, and we're just starting to get some of those out there currently. But The biggest thing that I've seen is with some of these vegetable crops, it's really hard to put out a sensor and not have it be ran over by a tractor. And so that's one of the limitations that I've seen is that you may put that out there, but then you have to either flag it or remove whenever they're doing work with a tractor. And so when I was doing my PhD work, I lost three different sensors. One getting squished, one getting the wire cut, and one absolutely getting ran over. And so I lost three different sensors doing that, and they're not cheap. So yeah, the
That's right.
strategy, and then being able to have a framework that you can put in the ground and not worry about it. I worked with a couple different companies on that, and they're definitely getting better.
You just triggered a lot of memories in my head of all my sensors I've lost to the alfalfa, machinery down here of getting it mowed, getting it cut, getting it swathed. I've had cows chew on my sensors. I've had deer. I had a bird make a nest one time on my sensor mount tower. It's a great point. There's lots of data to get. Keeping that data tower intact can be challenging on these long season crops. And I think that's why your emphasis on going to the field, knowing your ground, doing the scouting work, visiting, that just I think reinforces why we don't have such a hands-off approach as agronomists yet. We're getting out and getting in the field because that's one of the most reliable ways to get data is to go take it yourself.
I don't know how many times I've seen data look good, but you go out to the crop and something is clearly happening and it just looks off, but you can't place it. And then you go start talking to some of the irrigators, you go start talking to the farmer and figure out what actually, so that's probably my favorite part of the job is being the investigator and going and figuring out what happened here, what's going on. And so that's usually the most difficult part is having to go through, figure out what happened. And if it's not a nutrient, what happened to this crop?
Yeah, weather records are important. Spray records are super important in this business because of our compliance with minimum residue limits and things like that. Yeah, that's a great point. Forensic agronomy is what I think they should make a show about that. We can maybe we'll write a script, Christopher, and submit it to Hollywood or AI. We'll just get AI to do it. I wanted to ask you about soil health. You mentioned this at the start of the podcast. And when we often think about soil health in the row crops, right? Like soil health programs from the NRCS, it's corn, it's soybeans, wheat. When we think about some of these initiatives we've been taught and have been implementing across our systems, how do you get started in the higher value, quick vegetable crops in the longer term, sort of quasi permanent strawberry and caneberries? What's your approach for soil health here?
Rotational partners is going to be a big one. Having something you can rotate into the soil so that you're getting multiple different roots into that soil, but then also the amount of time that acreage is fallow is concerning. So you don't want soil to be fallow. You're going to lose that topsoil to the wind. You're going to open it up to any kind of irrigation. Microbes need a place to harbor and live, and a lot of them grow on those roots. So if you leave it fallow too long, you're going to lose your microbial population that is feeding your soil organic matter. A lot goes into it. I'd say a rotational partner is a big one, and then what inputs you're putting into it. What I've really noticed is that when you combine your chemical inputs with your microbial inputs and manage those correctly, really that is what brings the synergy of the system in and will help facilitate a lot of those nutrients into the plant.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's what a lot of listeners are interested in right now is how do I take this sort of traditional nutrient management as an agronomist you're taught, soil samples, tissue samples, irrigation water samples, nutrient budgeting, and how do I maybe introduce some of this other newer stuff to people like microbes? How do I take advantage of the microbial community below ground? How do they get the microbes to help decompose more organic matter or older plant tissues from the previous crop? How do I help them with the plant exudate relationship to help promote some synergy here? And I think that's a ton of fun. It's a fun space to be in. it's getting easier and easier to sort of measure what's in the soil for DNA and microbial, communities. I remember when that stuff used to be like $1,000 a sample, and it was just like, whoa, this is crazy. And now
Yeah.
it's much more
Yeah. Never
accessible,
mind.
much more affordable, and agronomists, I think, are turning to those tools more and more to complement the traditional nutrient and fertilizer plan writing that we've done for a long time.
Well, and that's really, I've heard it since I started my career, fertilizer efficiency. And what I was told was for every 10 pounds you put out, you get 1 to 2 pounds that actually makes it out into the crop. Really accessing a lot of those microbial populations to try and facilitate that and get a higher efficiency, you get 7 or 8 pounds of whatever you put out instead of 2 or 3. I mean, you want that bang for your buck. You want to make sure your money is going into the plant, not just into the soil or the aquifer or out into the stream. So making sure it's making it into the plant is really you want to make sure your money is well spent.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's where having a plan comes into place. And Christopher, you're working across 9 different states, all these different microclimates in between. And I'm sure that you're seeing that the planning that you do based on that local knowledge, based on what that local crop needs, that's really how you're optimizing your fertility management programs, and you get to do that 12 months out of the year. You probably want a vacation during Christmas, but we've got produce to grow down here in the desert, right?
Say we get Christmas off, but I mean, I absolutely love being out in the field and working with plants. I used to hear people say that the plants talked to them and told them what they needed, and for the longest time, I was asking, what are the plants telling you? What are the signs you're looking at? And I've reached that point that I can look at a plant and know what it's either deficiency or if it's lacking water or if it's too much water. I've gotten to the point where I kind of have an educated guess, but then you use those tools like soil sampling and tissue sampling to go out and verify what you're seeing.
2 more questions here, Christopher, and we'll wrap it up. A grower right now, we're sitting in a tractor in central Indiana, planting corn, planting beans. We're thinking about fertilizer use efficiency, and you come from this different background, right? Different crops, different microclimates. The goal is the same, right? Get the fertilizer in the crop, put it to work, make sure that crop can access it in that season, or if it's a longer season, or years, make sure that stuff will become available at some point, right? What's your biggest piece of advice to a grower who's really looking to get into this efficiency game and start reviewing some of these, what am I producing for every input dollar, like you do on a daily basis?
I would look at what your see. I mean, you really have to look at the entirety of it. What are the temperature ranges you're in? Is it warmer towards the beginning of the season or at the end? When is the most likely time that my plant is going to have a lot of growth? If you plant cold and go into the warm, you want to make sure you don't put a whole lot of fertilizer when it's cold because you're not going to get a lot of growth. So if you can do a split application, have a little bit up front, and then when you know there's going to be a lot of growth coming, put that second application on and really utilize and don't leach out a lot of your fertilizer, which I think that's the third point is irrigation efficiency, making sure that you're not over or under. All of my experiments for school were done at 60% water holding capacity. And really, that's the sweet spot. You have enough air, you have enough water, your roots are happy, your microbes are happy, your fertilizer is going to make it into the plant, theoretically.
Yeah, great point. Moisture management, right? It's that other piece of just one more thing to manage on a field. For us that come from this irrigated agriculture, it's a key partner. Just the managing the water. When you get it right, it makes your whole systems work much more smoothly. When you don't, it can make things very, very challenging. Or when you get those, some folks want it to rain, but sometimes when us produce agronomists, we're like, just keep the rain away, because I don't want the disease pressure, and you'll mess up my irrigation schedule.
Yeah. Give it 2 weeks.
Awesome.
Let me get it out of the field, and then it can rain.
Yeah. I think, Christopher, great lessons that apply to all these other crops that grow across, Canada, United States, down into Mexico, that it's the same ingredients coming in, some sunshine, a seed, some fertilizer, some ag chem, a market where people want to eat or use it in their lives, or livestock need to eat it. And yeah, that piece about the efficiency, and that kind of unites all of it. I wanted to ask you one final question. Is there anything we didn't cover about your agronomy and nutrient management career in produce that you think listeners will find interesting?
The biggest thing that I think people look at is how much is this going to cost me? And
Hmm.
a lot of people look at it as how much inputs did I put into that crop? But if you can put out $500 and get an okay crop, but you could put out $600 and get a really good crop, then that cost per unit dollar wise goes down. So the more you can produce with the same amount of money, even if you're spending a little bit more to get a better crop, better quality, better pest management, that really drives your cost per unit. Don't be afraid to spend a little bit extra if you know it's going to benefit you. That being said, don't get worked and spend a whole lot of extra money and have it not benefit you at all. But strategically spending another $50 here and there might benefit you a lot on that cost per unit. So I would say that's the biggest thing that people look at.
Christopher, fantastic point about return on investment, right? Start with what will my crop benefit from? What is my soil sample telling me with my test report? And also having maybe that relationship with a trusted advisor to say, hey, here's your program. Here's where there's some opportunities for tweaks and strategic investment, so we can maybe spend a little bit more money. Maybe it's an adjuvant. Maybe it's I'm a big fan of line cleaners for irrigation systems, because of all the stuff we have in the water down here. It clogs up the emitters and you lose distribution uniformity.
Especially in hydroponics.
Yeah. Finding those spots, right, where here's a dollar, let's spend it as smart as possible. And then I think for you, having the record system to keep track of everything, of performance, and so that you really are making sense of the complexity that it takes to grow crops. Well, Christopher, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I love the connection of agronomists to fertilizer management programs to the food that we eat, right? We're all buyers and consumers of food, and farming plays such an important role for making sure that it's in high abundance, it's safe, and it's high quality. To the listeners, I think it's important that if you're interested in digging deeper into nutrient management for high value crops, please check out Nutrien-eKonomics with a K.com. Keep listening for more insights from our agronomy team in the next segment, and stay tuned for more expert insights like we heard here from Dr. Christopher Hight.
Farming isn't farming without questions, and now there's a place to go for answers. At eKonomics, an entire team of agronomists are ready and waiting to help for free. No question is too big or too small. Visit Nutrien-eKonomics with a K.com and submit your question with the Ask an Agronomist feature. What is soil organic matter?
Well, that's a good question, because soil organic matter can mean different things to different people. But in soil science, we refer to this stuff in the soil that's of organic origin, that's carbon-based material, and it can include a variety of different materials. And soil organic matter is simply a broad term referring to all of the carbonaceous material in the soil that originated from living material. We're not counting mineral forms like lime, which contains carbon, calcium carbonate. So we're not counting that carbon material, but we're counting the carbon material that came from living things in that soil organic matter. Now, what are some of the components of soil organic matter that we might refer to? And these have different effects on the soil and impart different properties. So one component of soil organic matter might be fresh carbon residue that's left behind from the harvest. It may be dead roots, dying roots that are there that are contributing carbon. That's a relatively fresh material that's still in some state of process that's changing, and it can change very rapidly, stimulates biological activity to digest that carbon material. But that's one component of what we call soil organic matter. Another component might be dead organisms, bacteria and fungi and other organisms in the soil that have died and their bodies are left remaining in the soil. Those are carbon-based materials, and that's another component of the soil organic matter. And another form that is very important in soil chemistry and soil physical properties and soil quality in general is something we call humus. Now, humus is a very much older form of soil organic matter. Those are carbon compounds that have been produced by living organisms over a long period of time. And it reaches a point where I don't want to say it's an end product, but it kind of is an end product. It reaches a point where it becomes very stable. And this material, this humus, is very important in forming soil structure, gluing soil mineral particles together. But it becomes very stable and so can persist for many years in the soil. And this is, again, very desirable. In some cases, it may be as much as 50% of the total soil organic matter with these other components that we talked about as the other fractions. And there are other lesser fractions perhaps that we haven't mentioned, but these are some of the main components that we often think about in describing soil organic matter. And they all have important functions in the soil, either feeding the bacteria themselves or stabilizing soil aggregates, soil particles, and contributing to soil structure, holding nutrients in the soil because they have this cation exchange associated with them, and also as a reservoir of nutrients that can be released into the soil solution as that organic matter is decomposed and changes from one form to another, mineralized by the soil organisms releasing those nutrients into the soil solution for plant uptake. So many important functions of soil organic matter, but it's a very complex group of materials that exist in the soil, even though they're often a small percentage of the soil. That organic matter has very profound effects on soil behavior and soil physical and chemical properties.
If you liked what you heard today, share this podcast with someone who would enjoy it. Your neighbor, a friend, or your crop advisor. Your support helps us keep these conversations going. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a rating wherever you listen.